Okay, guys, everybody, welcome tonight. Brandy, would you mind forwarding the slide once?
There you go.
All right, everybody. Oops, sorry, I gotta also do one thing for me. Okay, welcome to our webinar tonight on Dyscalculia. We're featuring Adrienne Meldrum. We're so happy that she's here to share all of her insights on Dyscalculia. And of course, this webinar is sponsored by Dyslexia on Demand. We've been so excited to share this information with so many people. As of today, we have over 700 registrations. So we still feel so fortunate to be responsible for putting this information into the hands of so many people. And I feel that obviously, if this many people have registered for this webinar, this is information that there's just not enough of out there. So a couple of housekeeping items as we get started. We do have everyone muted for easier facilitation of the webinar. We will do a Q&A session at the end of Adrienne's presentation. So we ask if you would please place your questions in chat, and one of us facilitators are going to ask the questions for you. So depending on time, we're probably only going to be able to manage about 5 of them. And if you came here with any burning questions, please feel free to go ahead and put them up now. Also, I know that a lot of people want to know if this webinar is recorded, and it will be. I know that I don't expect all 700 to show up tonight because a lot of people are just looking for the recording. So as soon as it downloads, probably tomorrow morning, we are going to send out information on this webinar, obviously, and the recording so that everybody can get their hands on it. All right, if you'd forward, please, Brandy. Okay, so Adrienne, I want to go ahead and introduce her. She is the founder and owner of Made for Math, and it's an all online math centered focused company, focused on serving students with dyslexia, dyscalculia, and math related learning disabilities. So she's a certified multisensory math instructor through Marilyn Zecker, and she has a master's degree from Bridges Graduate School of Cognitive Diversity. Adrienne's also married with 3 boys, and she lives in Mesa, Arizona, where she enjoys soaking up those beautiful sunsets. And we're actually going to get the privilege of seeing her and being in her area this week. So I've known Adrienne for a while, not only as a multisensory math whiz, but we connected over the fact that we run similar parallel businesses, both servicing students with learning disabilities over an online teaching platform. So I've been so lucky to call her both a business mentor and a friend. All right, so really quickly, if you'd like to learn more about Adrienne's company and how they might be able to support your child with dyscalculia or any student in need of some more hands-on approach to learning math concepts, this is the name of her business. They do work virtually, similar to Dyslexia on Demand. So regardless of your location, you can connect with top-tier math professionals to help you guys out. Several Dyslexia on Demand students have also worked with Made for Math, and I've heard parents just really rave about their students' success. All right, so one last quick thing before we get started, we do have a quick message from our sponsor, Dyslexia on Demand.
Dyslexia on Demand is the premier provider of web-based one-on-one dyslexia therapy. We pride ourselves with connecting certified academic language therapists with students in need countrywide. Our philosophy is a child-focused one. We utilize regular standard score battery assessments to provide a prescriptive approach to therapy. Additionally, we offer at-cost dyslexia diagnosis testing for those without ready access to such opportunities. To learn more, please visit us at dyslexiaondemand.com.
All right. So really quickly, before we turn it over to Adrienne in and stop sharing our screen and let her share her presentation and introduce herself to you guys. Just a quick plug for our next Beyond the Letters webinar on September the 17th, and it's called No Dumb Questions. We'll have a panel of dyslexia advocates, from certified academic language therapists to diagnosticians, all the way to dyslexia specific educational advocates online to answer all of your questions. And there are no dumb questions. So too often ingesting everything that you need to understand about dyslexia, anywhere from the brain mechanics all the way through the special education system, can really be daunting and overwhelming. And we wanted to create a safe space for parents to be able to ask professionals for free any questions that you might have. So there is going to be an opportunity ahead of time to submit your questions if you're registered. So to register for that one, just like you did this one, you're going to head to dyslexiaondemand.com. All right, so we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Adrienne.
Okay, thank you so much for joining me tonight and giving me a little space in your busy schedule. I know many of you are just burnt out from your busy school year, so I appreciate you coming and learning more about Dyscalculia tonight. Just out of curiosity, so I know who my audience is, can you put in the chat for me if you are a cult or doing a reading therapy, or what kind of background do you have? While you're doing that, I'm going to share my screen. Okay.
We got lots of Celts. We have diags, teachers, lots of educators. So that's so exciting to see that.
Amazing. I love that. I love that. Shout out to all of the diagnosticians. That's amazing. I can't wait for math to have that. I think that's great. Awesome. Okay, good. Okay, so tonight's going to be really high level. I can't go as deep as you probably were really hoping that I would, but there's lots of ways to learn more. Like on our website, we've got lots of interesting blog posts you can read. We've got interviews with experts. There's a lot to learn, and we're always trying to update and bring you the latest information. So tonight, I'm going to give you the high levels, and feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and I'll make sure that we can get to them. And if we can't get to your question, you are always welcome to hop over to our website, click that contact page, and there's multiple ways you can reach out to us and get your questions answered. So with that tonight, let's get started talking about dyscalculia. And I wanted to just give you a reality check here. Research on dyscalculia began in the 70s, and it started gaining momentum around 2007. But I wanted to point out the scale of this graph here. This is 25 in 1 year, and we've only reached that a couple of times as of late in 2016 and 2017. But if you compare that to research on dyslexia, this began in the 50s and has slowly been gaining interest. And notice the scale here, 700. So there's lots more research being done on dyslexia than there is on dyscalculia, and that has to do a lot with the funding and interest. And I hope that mathematics can start catching up. So I would say we're really quite far behind what we know as far as dyslexia goes compared to dyscalculia. So really, dyscalculia is very much in its infancy. And we're trying to learn the best ways to remediate students. And we're still learning. And there's a lot that I might share tonight that could possibly change in the next couple of years based on what's happening in the research. But we know that dyscalculia affects about 6 to 7% of the population. So in the classroom, that translates to 1 or 2 students having dyscalculia. But what's fascinating, if we look at the PISA scores from 2022, that yellow line that you see is the average score globally. We are well below that here in the United States, and there's this continual decline. It's steep. We're in free fall right now with mathematics. So does that mean maybe there's a higher incidence of dyscalculia at play? Well, not necessarily. So often when people learn what I do, they come to me and they say, oh my goodness, my child must have dyscalculia because they're struggling with math. And that's usually something along these lines. They must be having this, but really, I ask them what's going on and I get more details. And sometimes it's things like this. And I listen and I think that's not necessarily dyscalculia. Just because a student is struggling with math does not equate that, doesn't mean that they have it. And so in the limited research that we do know about some emergent patterns. Some of it can be being born prematurely, can cause those areas of the brain to be not developed quite enough. We've got Fragile X syndrome, which also I think is really fascinating. But really, we see broader patterns like these students struggle with the visual spatial working memory. And they have average IQ, some of them above average IQ. And they really struggle with symbolic number processing. So in mathematics, this is like they struggle with knowing where to put the symbols and that the order of the numbers has a different meaning. So 16 is very different from 61. So they might get really confused by those things. They also struggle backing up really quick to the symbolic number processing. It's similar to like in reading when you're trying to map the grapheme to the sound, right? So it's kind of similar struggle. They struggle to map that quantity to the symbol in mathematics, and then they have a poor number sense. So the other debate that's been happening with dyscalculia is they're trying to figure out, is this domain specific? Is it domain general? And domain specific means like, is it one area of the brain? Domain general, is it multiple? And even these terms can be misleading. So I know in dyslexia, we refer to phonological awareness as being a domain specific skill for reading, but it's required for performance in other topics, right? And think about word problems. Executive function is also involved in processing information and ordering things in a proper way in mathematics. So therein lies the frustration. There's so much overlap and possible reasons for why a student struggles with mathematics, and it's not always dyscalculia. So rather than just focus on just dyscalculia today, I'm going to continue to talk about it, but I'm going to cover other ways that we're going to see these students struggle with mathematics. So that maybe you have some of that overview. So when you see it in your own practice, you kind of know what to recommend or where to point the student. So I'll be covering 5 different learning profiles that can impact mathematics. And there are many more, but I think you'll notice there's a lot of overlap in what I recommend. But really my goal is to make mathematics available for all types of learners. So jumping back to dyscalculia, it comes with levels of severity as well. So typically we see students struggling with one-to-one correspondence and understanding quantity along with that written symbol. So for example, a person with this learning profile might have 0 sense about how many bowls and spoons to put out at the family dinner table. They can't do that one-to-one correspondence and figure out that there's 5 people in my family, so I need 5 forks, 5 spoons, 5 knives, 5 plates. They really struggle with this. Many of the same remediation strategies that I'm going to mention for dyslexia work for these students, but for opposite reasons. So dyslexic students have language deficits that cause them to have difficulty mapping that language, whereas a dyscalculic student has usually pretty strong language skills, but a difficulty mapping the language and to the quantities and those mathematical symbols. So to help a student like this, it's really important that we're doing concrete representational abstract instruction. So it's simultaneous too, where we're doing these things all together. It's multisensory processing. So like in dyslexia, we're going to build and draw quantities and map that to a numeral, to the number, to the symbol. And we're also going to touch and say those quantities out loud. So if we're building the number 16, I'm going to have a place value map. And it's going to have 10 in the tens place and 6 in the ones place. And they're going to touch it with their hand and say it out loud. 16 is made of 1 10 and 6 ones. What's its name? 16. So those things really help the student start to map and understand how place value is important, that the numbers have meaning behind them. And then it's really important to be really explicit when you're teaching number composition and place value and tie it to number lines and focus on smaller increments of new information. A lot of schools will spend a whole hour teaching a new concept, and that is too much for a student. New concepts need to be short in duration. An hour-long lesson needs to be broken up into a warm-up and practice and building the vocabulary, and then we get to that new concept for 10, 15 minutes. Then we practice it, okay? So we need to be spending time practicing all the ways we can compose numbers and all the ways we can represent it, and showing the student that if I have this dice that you see here on the screen, that it's 5, and it doesn't matter if I turn the dice 90 degrees, it's still 5. My hand has 5 fingers, that's 5 too. They need to understand that there's different kinds of quantities that still mean the same thing. So if you want help with this, I actually recommend you go check out the book that I and my team member Heather Brand wrote. It's called Math Facts to Memory. We're just adding within 10, but it drills down deep into these things to help with the C, the R, and the A. It's more like a scripted program that you probably have seen in your OG training. Another great adjustment you can make that's a quick, easy win is to adjust the facts that you're using when you're teaching a student. So instead of using all of the math facts, let's say we're working on multiplication, instead of doing everything all included in one and we're just trying to do the best we can, we want you to actually narrow it way down. So if we're learning the sevens, you're going to start with learning 7 times 1 up to 7 times 4. And you work on that for a week or two, then you add in another one, and every game that you play can involve these games with other ones that have been previously mastered. So kind of like your review decks in your reading therapy. You want to keep reviewing those math facts and narrow it down, and you're expanding slowly over time. And then games. Games are amazing because it's a low stake environment. It keeps the game, and make sure to keep them short and focused on those selected facts and skills so that we can maintain their attention span. So another interesting hallmark to dyscalculia is that these students also have slow working speed due to the lack of numeracy and their processing and extensive gaps in that semantic knowledge, the how and the what of math. So watching these students can feel like slow dial-up, or maybe even as severe as Morse code. It takes a really long time for them to process what's happening. So if that's an issue that you're seeing, same with dyslexia, we want to give them shortened assignments, and we want to reduce that rapid automatic naming, the RAN. Same thing. So give them extra time. Try to give them short, impactful assignments. And then to reduce the load on working memory, you want to give them a near point reference. So think of like a graphic organizer, a math facts chart. Again, but with a math facts chart, don't give all of them to the student because that becomes an inefficient calculator. Block out the ones that they don't need so that they can focus on the ones that they're currently working on. And then really try to limit your teacher talk. I see this a lot. It is so hard for us to be comfortable with the quiet. And when you're working with the student, they really just need you to be quiet and allow them to think and process. Don't be too quick to jump in and help them. In order to give yourself that opportunity to be quiet, grab some chapstick, take a drink of water, whatever you need to do, sit on your hands. Put your hands over your mouth if you're just really struggling, because I know how hard it is. Because if it's on dial-up or Morse code, you want to jump in and help them, but you really have got to be quiet and give them time to think. And there's some strengths. There are strengths to be found, just like we see with dyslexia. It's a little harder to see though with dyscalculia. They've really honestly failed in hunting for these things, but I saw some promising research where they're finding some things. They're often gifted communicators. That language part isn't as hindered by the dyslexia. So, but we do see them having a lot of strengths in extracurriculars, and they have amazing compensatory skills. They are pretty good at memorizing. They have tenacity. They know how to hang in there when things get hard. So let's talk about ways that dyslexia impacts math. So we've got, dyslexia is affecting that read, write, and spell. And they're often struggling with finding the right words or understanding the vocabulary. Those word problems are difficult. Um, I know I have a son that has dyslexia, and it is tough to watch him do science, because that's a reading heavy activity, right? And his English classes, he's in high school, it's still really hard for him, even though he's done language therapy. So to support a student with dyslexia in mathematics, you're going to want to use explicit instruction. So teach students the vocab. Use your morphology skills to teach the students the part of the words. So one of my favorite examples is perimeter. So peri means around. The meter part of it is talking about distance, and talk about that's talking about the distance around an object, and tied to other words like periscope. If you're curious about more examples of morphology, head to our YouTube channel. We have a whole list of videos for vocabulary there. You can check those out. They're really, really good, and they have gross motor movement and some rhythm to them. So you want to go investigate those. They're excellent. Rhythm and music can really help a student. I was just watching a session the other day. I was floored. I know I couldn't have done this, but this student was musically gifted, and she was able to come up with her own song to help her with math facts to some sort of classical piece of music. I was stunned that she could sing the tune and remember her math facts. That's amazing. So lean into those strengths when you can. So if we can use rhythm and music with our students, it helps them. And if we can use cueing language, that also helps our students. So one that we use a lot in division, instead of saying goes into, right? Like you hear that at school. How many times does 5 goes into 20? It's not a phrase that's really helpful, especially when you have dyslexia. So instead, we say, how many groups of 5 can I make out of 20? Or another way is, if I start with 20, how many groups of 5 can I make? So we use one of those two things and we say it slowly. And counting also can be a struggle for these students. So we use a beanbag to toss back and forth to help students get the rhythm of counting. And we practice counting forward and backwards, as well as skip counting. And we have all of our students do counting. It doesn't matter if you're in elementary school or middle school, we're doing counting in every session. So it's not uncommon to see students counting by negatives and positives, by fraction, by decimal. All kinds of counting really helps them prime the pump for the mathematics that's coming at them. And we love gross motor too. Gross motor helps get that whole body involved, that simultaneous processing. It helps them put some muscle memory into what they're learning. And then word problem instruction, we want it to have a structure to it. So the one that we recommend is called COMPS, COMPS. If you want to check it out, that's on our website. I interviewed the researcher behind that, and it has really strong evidence. It's schema-based instruction, and our students are obsessed with this, especially the ones with dyslexia. If they do a problem without it, they're really frustrated because they need that framework to help them remember what they're trying to do. So there's patterns to word problems. We're usually trying to put things together, or we're taking them apart. We're either making equal groups or we're dividing, right? And so there's a structure to it, and you can teach the students this. This is so much more powerful than teaching students keyword finding because it doesn't always make sense. It doesn't follow the same patterns, whereas these frameworks do. So go check that out. It was developed by Dr. Chen. She's the best. Okay, so the other thing that we see is that students with dyslexia struggle to find the right words, right? But these students struggle to find their math facts. So my son has dyslexia, and when he was in elementary school, his scores in math were not good. The teachers were concerned about him, but when I had the testing done, it turned out he was gifted in mathematics. He just could not recall those math facts in such a way that it was helpful to him in a classroom setting. So we worked with him on that and we advocated for him, and he's in advanced math classes and really excelling in those situations now. So again, just because a student's bad at math facts doesn't mean they have dyscalculia. It could just be their dyslexia and struggling with the recall that we're seeing. So same suggestions that we mentioned for dyscalculia, we want that CRA instruction. We want to subitize. Subitizing is dot patterns, and we're talking about conceptual dot patterns, not random ones. So like dice patterns, domino patterns, those are really helpful for students. And we want students to have the experience of building and drawing those. And we want them, again, to touch and say as they're writing and drawing. And an example of this is analyzing a quantity of something like 243. So we would ask the student to build 243 either with craft sticks or base 10 blocks. And we're going to have them touch and say those things. So 200 is made of 2 hundreds, 4 tens, and 3 ones. What's its name? 243. So the student is always touching and saying those quantities to help map it into their brain. It's really helpful to them. And then those counting activities I talked about earlier are key for that student with dyslexia. It primes the pump and gets them ready to start recalling those math facts more automatically. So we want to narrow down what we're working on, choose 2 or 3 sets that we want, and make sure we're using those inverse operations. So if we're teaching multiplication, we want to teach the division at the same time so that they understand, kind of like a zipper. We're zipping up and we're zipping down. We want to make sure that they can do both of those. And so it helps with that retrieval over time. And then also the games. They're just, I can't emphasize enough. And the games do not have to be difficult. We play a lot of bump. I don't know if you've seen bump before, but we'll use those selected facts, and the game board has only math facts 9 times 1 through 9 times 5, for example. And that's all you're playing on the board, and the student loves it and they get to practice. So make sure that you're not overcomplicating the games. Make it easy for you. Selected facts is the way to go with that. So then with dyslexia, we also have that slower working speed, and it's the same recommendations, short assignments. Give them those near point references. And then please, please, I'm begging you, limit your teacher talk, give them time to think and solve, let them have that load time. Really, just get your chapstick, whatever you can do. Take a break to let them think. And then I wanted to just highlight their strengths. Make sure to use their strengths in this session. So dyslexics have a lot of visualization strengths. They're going to love hands-on manipulatives. They can draw and think, take what's in their mind, put it on the paper. So really lean into that, help them build their inner number line. They're going to like those subitized quantities. So help use those visual strengths to retrieve information for them. And then math reasoning, guide students to use that reasoning strength. My son has a lot of amazing reasoning strengths to him. So help them to go back and evaluate the answers, and catch mistakes, and you'll see that they actually are really good at that. So, and then we like to tell our students, good mathematicians don't get everything perfect. Good mathematicians still make mistakes, but they also check their work. So we teach that explicitly, how to check your work. So if you've got a student that seems to be struggling significantly, could it be dyslexia? Could it be dyscalculia? Or is it possibly both? And if it's possibly both, it's a tough recovery, tough work ahead of you. You're going to see stronger deficits in the semantics, the how numbers work, and those mental representations. You need way more time with a concrete and explicit instruction. And that think time without the teacher talk is crucial, because it's just taking all of their bandwidth to get it down. So you're going to see a student like this, the amount of time it takes to remediate them is a lot longer. We've got some students that have been with us for 5 years, but there is hope. That student came in and doctors and teachers and everyone's telling these parents, Yeah, I don't think they're going to be able to learn mathematics. And I'm here to tell you they can learn them, and we're seeing it happen. That student that I'm thinking of started out not really being able to add within 5, and now is doing fractions and pre-algebra, which is amazing, amazing. So it took a long time to get there, but that student's got it down. So another learning profile that I'm sure you're all familiar with is the ADHD and executive functioning issues. So this is referring to the student's ability to sustain attention and store information in a way that's accessible again in the future. So if you haven't seen the information processing model before, I'll go over it quickly here. But all learning begins with attention, and it can be processed through the olfactory, the kinesthetic, the auditory, and the visual. And then it's processed by the amygdala. This is where it's hunting for, is this safe information? Is there a bear out to get me? This is where math anxiety can take hold. If the student's feeling threatened by math, it's going to shut down all the learning and not much is going to get in. But if it makes it past that, this is why we play so many games, is it's such a low barrier to entry. Students want to play the games. Then we can take the information that's coming in and it's being held in the working memory, but only in 3 or 4 pieces at a time. So that's why we want to select number of facts that we teach the students, because they can't hold a whole lot more. We need to free up that working memory as much as possible to learn other content as it's coming in. So we want to make sure the attention is focused not just on math concepts, but on the vocabulary, so we can help the student encode this information into their brain for further retrieval. So again, the CRA is the way to go. And then we recommend cutting the clutter. So limit the things that distract on a piece of paper. A lot of the worksheets that our students get feel like a death sentence to them. There's just too much. The font's too little. There's not enough room for them to write. My son once received a review packet that had 20 pages in it. And I mean, the howling and crying that went on, even though he could do the math, it was just overwhelming. And so we had to pull 1 page out per day and give it to him to do. And even then, it was still overwhelming. So cut the clutter as much as you can. If you're making worksheets for your students, I actually recommend having no more than 4 problems per page, depending on what kind of math we're talking about. If it's basic addition and subtraction, you could probably get away with 6, but you want really big fonts, 14 to 16 size font. No cutesy font either. Like, we just got to keep it real vanilla for these guys. And then with classroom management or session management with these students, be explicit in teaching them, what are we doing with these manipulatives, so that they are not distracted by all the fun things they could do with it, right? They might want to put their stuff on their heads and be bugs for a minute or whatever. You gotta stay really narrow in with them and let them know these are what we're doing with the manipulatives. Here's how we're going to use them. Use them and then put them away out of view and move to the next one. Okay. And if you're using digital manipulatives, I'm hesitant to say like go all in on digital. The research is pretty clear that they come with almost equal learning outcomes. However, there is research that's suggesting that if you're using physical manipulatives, the retention is better over time. So if you're really struggling to keep that student engaged online, try just switching to just physical ones in front of you only. And then like your workspace that you're working with the student, make sure that it's clear of distractions, maybe give them some headphones. If you're in a digital environment, think about what does my environment look like around me? Blur out your background. You'd be surprised at what can really distract a student. And the other thing I would say for online tutoring, limit the amount of applications that you're flipping through. It is amazing how quickly you can lose their attention because you were looking for a tab, and that just split second can derail, and they're talking about the cat join them for the session today and you've lost them and it's going to take a minute to get them back on track. So the other thing too to think about is pacing. We want to either go a little bit faster for our more impulsive students or go at a slower rate for our students that need that extra processing time. And these students also struggle with planning and organizing their thoughts. So we want to give them those near point references. Lots of the graphic organizers we use have what we call buttons that are visual reminders of what the steps are. We have one for long division that's really good. And that helps support their working memory. And they can use their non-dominant finger to put their finger on the button so they can remember what step they were on. And that's really helpful to our students. And then over time, we start involving them in making their own buttons to help them organize what the steps are of what they're doing. Color coding can also be super helpful for middle and high school students. We use yellow and red, and we teach a little chant for them where if we're working with finding variables that are the same, we do this little chant before. Circles and squares and diamonds, oh my, circles and squares, diamonds, oh my. And then they start circling the things that go together. Then they do squares around the other things that go together. We do diamonds around the other things that go together to help them visually see what belongs together. And that really helps our students. Then make sure to teach them explicitly, here's how you check your answers. Show them what kinds of common errors happen. A common one that we see is failing to check the sign, like what operation was I doing? Was this positive or was it negative? And then they can make cards about ways they can remember to check for those kinds of errors and use it as their own near point reference. So as we know, ADHD has some strengths to it. We see that they're super creative and enthusiastic, and they're gifted at communication and also really gifted at avoiding work. They're enthusiastic, and we see that they are excellent in things like theater or persuasion, right? They love to keep us entertained. I had a student once that was so fascinated that I was a business owner, and I was just filling in for his teacher, and he somehow, this fourth grader, got me talking about the business and totally derailed our math session. And before you knew, I had spent 10 minutes talking about some of the pain points of our business to a fourth grader. And I had to remember, I got off track because he's so engaging. He's so much fun to talk to, right? He's going to be a great entrepreneur someday. I know it. Okay, and the last one I wanted to cover tonight is autism. Now, this is really interesting. When you come across a student with autism, the way they process mathematics is very different, and they can be very rigid in their approaches and really struggle to generalize information and solving in new ways. So again, I keep recommending CRA, and the truth is it's because it's beneficial to all students. Every student, whether you have a learning difference or not, could benefit from this, but it's essential for students that are struggling for a variety of reasons. It's just good instruction. So during the CRA framework, teachers can help students generalize how the algorithm works. What does it actually mean instead of just memorizing the steps? And it can teach the students lots of different ways of representing things. So for example, a student who didn't know that 5 could mean 5 fingers or 5 on a dice or 5 tallies or 5 jumps on a number line, or maybe the student that struggles with solving multiplication. They didn't realize that the multiplication they play in a game is the same multiplication they're doing on a test. We've seen some of that severe issue with not being able to generalize. So these students can be prone to using their pattern recognition strength to help them solve algorithms without actually knowing what's going on. So that's a real issue. So we want to use mathematical language that's appropriate. So we've heard some teachers teach subtraction with regrouping as saying, get a babysitter if you're too little. Like, that kind of language is really harmful to students with autism because they're going to take it so literally. Like, what do you mean? My numbers need a babysitter? I don't understand what you're saying. And they are completely distracted now that you just brought babysitting into mathematics. So those kinds of things are really harmful. So you want to use clear, explicit language. So again, a structured lesson plan can help you with this, and that structure can help the student feel at ease. They know what's coming next, but also help them have an opportunity to learn how to generalize those things. So when we're generalizing, we want to teach the applications of the algorithm and then connect it to different kinds of representations. So we want different kinds of story problems, different forms of the algorithm. So instead of writing vertical equations all the time, like 3 + 4, we want to do some horizontal and vertical, stacking them. Anyway, so we want to help them see that there's different uses for the vocabulary, that the word of in mathematics is really important. And that might be a word that they might skip over and not see that it's important in a word problem. And then we want to explain to them why there's various methods for solving. Sometimes they get really attached to doing it one way, and we want to talk to them about how we want to move to a different way because it's more efficient. We want to teach you to be able to do this at any moment in time, because you might not have your manipulatives with you all of the time, right? So they need a lot of the why and when am I going to use this in order to have the buy-in and interest in learning a different way. And then you might see a student with autism that struggles with sensory information. So either they're seeking sensory or they're avoiding one. So some students detest working with various manipulatives. So like one that we use is clay. We use clay to teach decimals. And some of the students really don't like the way it feels on their skin. So get creative about how you're going to teach decimals in that case, or allow them to opt out of using that particular manipulative. These students could also struggle with filtering out noise and focusing on just the person that's speaking. So we want you to allow them to give either some earbuds to block out the sound, especially when they're doing independent work, and give them that manipulative choice that I was talking about. And then that cut the clutter that we mentioned earlier, hugely important for these students. So okay, let's talk about the autism strengths really quickly. They are excellent at pattern recognition. They love using those buttons and graphic organizers and following a predictable lesson plan. I had a student that knew right when I'm about to end, and I would always lose him in the last few minutes because it was so predictable. But it was really helpful for him to know because he had kind of an internal clock that was helping him know how much longer in my session. So, and you can even label, if you're in a digital space, label your lesson plan so the student knows. So in your own reading therapy that you might be doing, you could label the parts of the lesson for students like this that need that kind of consistency. So many of our students are passionate and they have a lot of special interests. So make sure to theme your lessons. I see a lot of really interesting lessons. I had a teacher go above and beyond for a student that was obsessed with Taylor Swift. And for months, it was Taylor Swift everything in the lesson plan. But the student was high engagement, really enjoyed it, saw a lot of purpose in the mathematics. So I encourage you to get curious about how you can integrate those things into your sessions with students. So with that, my plug here, multisensory math is what we've been talking about tonight. It really is just the basis for good instruction for all students, including those students with dyscalculia, but it's essential for anyone that's struggling to learn mathematics, and it's appropriate for all learners. And this is exactly what we do at Made for Math. And again, if you want to know more, head over to our website. There's so much more to learn. I wish I had hours to give you, but you also would get overwhelmed because it's taken me a long time, 10 years now of learning this. And I'm excited that I got to give you just a little bit tonight. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up and let you ask questions. And yeah, let's go for it.
Thank you so much, Adrian, for sharing your vast knowledge. Not only was exciting, I think, to learn more understanding about dyscalculia. I think a lot of this audience were all educators, and how often I know that I am faced with students or speaking to parents of those students and helping to understand a little bit more. But also, I think that there's so much overlap, right, with dyslexia, and then also
Mhm.
just the populations that we serve.
Oh,
A
yeah.
lot of it were like really good refreshers, kind of like when, just in terms of like ASD, for example, how you went so deep into that. There's so many parallels that with what we do. So, and I really loved your encouragement, just about how all children are going to be successful. I think, again, I'm going to speak mainly to a lot of the Celts in the room, how often we've spoken to parents who have told us that some educator told them their child would never read. And we know that that's just not true. We just have to teach them in the way that their brains learn. So, all right. So getting to questions, there was, first of all, one thing that you would have missed because you're busy presenting is that a little community really got started in
Oh.
the chat, with a lot of people asking questions and then other people answering them. But some of the
Cool.
outstanding ones, one of them, and I've got a feeling there's probably several diags who can jump in with this question, but is how do we get a child tested for dyscalculia? She's specifically in Texas. And, I would assume as a non-diag that you would just go through the school and mention your specific concern. But is there anything you can share with us about that?
Yeah. So I want to make it clear that you don't necessarily have to have a diagnosis in order to benefit from the instruction. That's not required if you had a child you wanted to refer to us. But having that peace of mind of having a diagnosis, I totally understand that and respect it. So depending on your financial situation, you could choose to do it yourself and go private. And the wait list to get in with a neuropsychologist can be quite lengthy. So I love that the state of Texas, there's more diagnosticians that work both at the district level, but also with a neuropsychologist to help shorten that wait time. But you can hunt for people to do it on the private side. And if you want to see a list of providers, I can provide you with a link, Megan, to a whole list. We have a long list of people that can do it. And then if you go through the schools, yes, the schools could maybe make a diagnosis like that, but they're not going to call it dyscalculia. They're going to call it a learning disability in mathematics, and then they'll list that severity, right? So that is probably what I would recommend. I personally went the private route because I was living in the state of Idaho at the time, and Idaho did not and still does not have a lot of support. So I got my son on a list. We waited about 5 months and then we did all of the testing. And that's when I was just there trying to get a dyslexia diagnosis and then discovered the gifted mathematics piece. So anyway, so that gave me the ammunition to go back to the schools and say, hey, he's got these issues. What would you like to help me with? And they can't help me with hardly anything. So I paid for therapy on my own. Like I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this journey. But I like that Texas is making some advancements in those. Like props to Texas. I think you're amazing. So that's how I would recommend it personally. But again, I want to emphasize you do not have to have a diagnosis to start getting help in the first place.
That's the same thing that we actually always say to parents, is that the most important part is starting therapy versus what we call it. What we call it is a child has a gap. They have
Yes.
a struggle that we need to help them with. And regardless of what we call it, this will, at least dyslexia therapy, address that. So all right. Another really valuable question was, do you have any recommendations for curriculum that people can use either in the classroom or I'm sure at home as a homeschooled parent that helps with this, or anything that you would recommend?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
So there isn't a curriculum that I can recommend. I mean, we're working on it in-house. I have the first installment, which is volume 1, which is scripted like you're used to seeing in language therapy. So That's math facts to memory volume 1, but we're only focusing on adding within 10, adding and subtracting within 10. And our goal is to continually keep adding topics, but there is no perfect curriculum. Even this one, you obviously read a curriculum and then adjust it for the student that's sitting in front of you, right? But I do tend to like a couple of them. Singapore math comes to mind. That one's pretty decent if you're just looking for a starting point. But some of the materials need to be adjusted. You know, some of the worksheets that are provided out of the box are just too overwhelming for our students. So, or they don't have those selected facts. But if you're looking for like a pacing, something to help guide you along that path, I like that one. But I also have a little bit longer list. Again, Megan, I can provide that as a resource to everybody. So you can go check that out and see some of those. But another one that comes to mind is called Bridges. If you Google Bridges Home Connection, you'll find PDFs out there. And that's a great one to look for examples of problems. They have, they use base 10 blocks. They use rec and recs. I don't know if you guys know what rec and recs are. It's like a beaded number line, kind of like an abacus, but it only has 2 rods on it. So we like that one. Again, a little too cluttered, like right out of the box, but it gives you a lot of great starting points. There's a lot of adjustment. And then I actually would recommend going to who I learned from, Marilyn Zecker. I would go get the training from her. So she's not going to give you a curriculum either. She's going to give you the approach. How do you take a curriculum that the school's given you and modify it for these students? That's what she's teaching you. So you can find that at multisensorymath.online. That's where her stuff is found.
All right. There's still lots of conversation going, which is exciting, and people are answering each other's questions. The last question I think that just kind of sticks out was asking if you know about any specific research about, and this is important to us therapists who work virtually too, basically the efficacy or the success, the increased success of tactile manipulatives over doing it on the screen and moving things around.
Yes, but because I'm a little anxious, I can't pull the name right out of my head.
We don't expect to find it right here on the spot.
Okay, so I'm a mega nerd. I have an error table. I don't know if you guys know what error table is, but it's like spreadsheets on steroids of research. And I can find those resources for you and link them out so that you can look at them. But yes, it is, it has strong evidence that that's what you would like to do. And I talked to a researcher out of the University of Washington, and you know, I just agree with her sentiment that a student wants to use, that's like begging to use the manipulatives, and if you're trying to rush them into the algorithm or just the abstract, the truth is they'll do it when they're ready. You know, like don't rush them to this other way. Let them have those manipulatives. Like they don't want to have those, but it's really helping them make some connections. So I can send you a link to her website too. She has some really interesting research around all of those things too.
Okay, that would be awesome. I would say just as a CALT, we like here, we do send out physical manipulatives to every student because whereas I don't have the research, I feel like that the connection is so much stronger than just dragging and dropping a mouse, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes.
So I have to, you know, I haven't seen the research. That was just always my tummy feel. So it's awesome to hear that there is research. I want to see it too. So that's awesome. But yeah. All right, I don't know if anybody feel free to unmute if there's a question that I missed specifically that you'd like to take the next, like, let's say, keep 5 more minutes of Adrian's time. I'm just gonna pregnant pause for a second. All right, I got a feeling they're on. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good. What are the biggest, I wouldn't call them red flags, but like the biggest things that stand out for students, like that have dyscalculia? Like, what are the things that we should look for?
That's a
Yeah,
great
there's a lot. Um, so these students, one thing I'm thinking of is they really have no sense of time. They have no idea what 5 minutes feels like or an hour. They don't really have a sense for what the calendar is even all about. They're terrible with directionality. They get lost really easily. Sometimes you even like gross motor wise, you'll see that they're more clumsy as a student. That visuospatial that I was talking about, they really struggle with these kinds of things. So I have another link for you. Again, it's in depth. Let me grab it for you really quick. So I think that's a great question. And again, it kind of goes back to, even though those are some of the red flags, a student with dyslexia also struggles with directionality, right? Like, I think I'm mildly dyslexic. I couldn't tie my shoes to save my life, right? Like, it took me a very long time because that was a directional heavy activity, and I still struggle with directionality things. So, anyways, so just be careful. Like, I think the definition of dyscalculia is so broad still that we're still just kind of capturing all kinds of learners. So it hasn't really been fine-tuned. But I'm going to grab that link for you really quick. Yeah, here it is.
While
I'll
she
put it in the
does
chat
that,
for you.
yeah, while she is searching, so we're not like, so everyone's not looking at her while she's looking for that, because I know I get and I can't even remember how to like respond to an email in that moment. So we, just so that y'all know, Adrian will share some of the things that we've discussed with us. And then when we receive that, we will tomorrow send out the recording to everyone so that you're able to share this with other people so that you can review for yourself, etc. So that is coming. And so you'll see another email, be watching for another email from Dyslexia On Demand. Oops, somebody's just getting here.
Oh.
Probably had the time zone off.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Yes, please spread the word. Like, this knowledge is needed so badly in the schools too. Please, please, please. Yes.
Yeah, and that's another reason it's so exciting to see so many educators here who can not only interested in learning more, but who can be that good word. So
yes, absolutely. And again, if you want to ask me more questions and I didn't get to your question, just head to our website. There's a contact button. You can contact us in any of the 3 ways we've got on there.
Awesome. All right. Okay. Did you share it in chat? I'm not sure if you did.
I did. I put the link in there. Sorry.
You're smiling, waiting.
It got buried.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. It was our pleasure to host Adrian, and we just so appreciate you, Adrian. Thanks,
Yes,
guys.
thank you.
Bye.